Ladies, let's stop giving people more credit than they deserve. When a man's behavior doesn't line up with his words, some of y'all run straight to, "Oh, he's just confused." No, no, no. Confusion is when you don't know which ice cream flavor to pick. Confusion is when you forget where you parked your car. A grown man who can figure out his career, his hobbies, his schedule, and his friends suddenly becomes confused about you. Please, he's not confused. He's testing you. And let me tell you why this matters. Because every single time you allow mixed signals, every time you ignore red flags, every time you settle for crumbs, hoping they turn into a full meal, you're showing him exactly what you'll tolerate. That's not confusion on his part. That's a test. And whether you pass or fail is entirely up to you. When someone truly likes you and is invested in you, you don't have to decode their feelings like you're trying to crack a safe. Real interest is consistent. It shows up, it calls back, it makes the effort without you begging for it. The problem is, many people fall into the trap of making excuses for inconsistent behavior. They say things like, "He's just busy," or "He's going through a lot right now," or "He's shy and doesn't know how to express himself." But more often than not, when you're dealing with mixed signals, the kind where he's warm and affectionate one day and cold or absent the next, it's not because he's clueless. It's because it's intentional. Mixed signals are rarely random. They're a deliberate way to see how much you're willing to tolerate and how far he can go without losing you. Think about it. This is someone who manages to make time for his hobbies, answer texts from his friends, scroll through social media, and commit to his work schedule without fail. He knows how to show up where he wants to show up. So when it comes to you, the sudden inconsistencies, the disappearances, and the emotional whiplash aren't accidents. They're signals. Signals designed to keep you just close enough to hope, but not close enough to feel secure. And here's the key. It's not about him being confused about his feelings. It's about him watching your reaction. He's testing the waters to see if you'll chase after him, if you'll keep trying to win him over, or if you'll stay even when his effort drops. This kind of behavior plays on your emotions because inconsistency has a way of making you work harder for validation. When someone is hot and cold, your brain starts craving the hot moments so much that you tolerate the cold ones just to get another hit of attention. It's like a slot machine. You keep pulling the lever hoping to hit the jackpot again, even though most of the time you're losing. And for the person sending those mixed signals, that's exactly the point. They get to see how much of your self-worth is tied to their approval. The danger is, if you accept mixed signals for too long, you start to normalize them. You start thinking that relationships are supposed to feel like a constant guessing game. But that's not love, that's control. And control works best when it's subtle, when you don't even realize you're being tested. That's why it's so important to recognize the pattern early. Consistency is a sign of genuine interest, and inconsistency is a sign of uncertainty or manipulation. Let's take an example. Imagine Sarah meets a guy named Jake. In the beginning, Jake is attentive, texting her in the morning, calling her at night, making weekend plans. Sarah feels special and starts to believe they're building something real. But after a few weeks, Jake starts pulling back. He goes 2 or 3 days without calling, doesn't reply to texts for hours, and when he finally does, it's short and vague. Then, just when Sarah starts to feel frustrated enough to pull away, Jake comes back with the same charm as before. Long conversations, deep compliments, spontaneous plans. Sarah feels relieved and thinks, okay, maybe he was just busy. But the cycle repeats. What Sarah doesn't realize is that Jake's behavior is deliberate. He's seeing if she'll stay when he disappears, if she'll still answer quickly when he finally reaches out, if she'll overlook the cold spells just because she misses the warmth. By sticking around and accepting the inconsistency, Sarah is unintentionally teaching Jake that she will tolerate it. And once he knows that, there's no incentive for him to change. The truth is, when someone wants to be in your life, they don't make it hard for you to know it. They don't put you in a position where you're constantly wondering where you stand. If a person's interest fluctuates like a light switch, it's not because they're confused. It's because they're controlling the pace and direction of the connection, and they want to see how long you'll play along. You break this cycle by refusing to chase after mixed signals. You break it by matching effort, not feelings, by stepping back when they step back instead of closing the gap for them. The moment you show that you won't fight for scraps of attention, you shift the dynamic. Either they step up or they step out. Either way you win, because you're no longer stuck in a test you didn't sign up for. Mixed signals are not a mystery to solve, they're a message to hear. And that message is loud and clear. If someone's behavior keeps making you question your worth, the test isn't about whether they'll choose you. It's about whether you'll choose yourself. Every relationship, whether romantic, professional, or even platonic, is full of subtle tests. These tests aren't always malicious or premeditated. Sometimes they're unconscious behaviors that reveal how much respect someone has for you, and more importantly, how much respect you have for yourself. When a man pushes your boundaries, whether it's showing up late without apology, speaking to you in a way that feels dismissive, or failing to follow through on promises, he's essentially collecting data. The unspoken question behind these moments is, what are your limits? What will you put up with? And your reaction becomes the answer. If you keep excusing the behavior or smoothing things over just to keep the peace, you're not just forgiving him in that moment, you're setting a precedent. It's like writing the rules of the game in permanent ink, and those rules say, I have no limits when it comes to you. That's dangerous because once someone believes you have no boundaries, it becomes incredibly hard to shift their perception. People rarely upgrade the way they treat you without a compelling reason. In fact, the opposite is true. If they see you accepting less, they tend to give you even less over time. Standards aren't just about what you expect from others, they're about the minimum you will accept before you walk away. If you don't enforce those standards, they're just nice ideas floating in your head. Enforcement is where respect is either built or broken. Think about it. A teacher can say the classroom rule is no phones, but if students keep using their phones and the teacher does nothing, that's no longer a rule. It's just a suggestion nobody takes seriously. In relationships, your standards are the same way. If you don't uphold them, they lose all meaning. Here's a short but powerful example. Imagine a woman named Maya who starts dating a guy named Chris. In the beginning, things feel great. He's charming, attentive, and makes her laugh. But after a month, Maya notices something. Chris is often late to their dates. At first, it's just 10 minutes, then 20, then sometimes 45. Each time, he offers a lighthearted excuse. Traffic, work ran late, I lost track of time. Maya is slightly annoyed, but she brushes it off because she likes him and doesn't want to seem too demanding. The truth is, Chris is watching how Maya reacts. The first time, he may have genuinely been running late. The second time, he might have wondered, let's see if she says anything. By the third or fourth time, it's no longer about traffic or schedules. It's about testing how much she values her own time. When Maya stays silent and keeps waiting for him, Chris learns two things. She won't hold him accountable, and her time isn't a priority to her, so it won't be a priority to him either. Now, lateness becomes a regular part of their dynamic, and Maya unknowingly sends the message, you can disrespect my time and I'll still be here. Passing a test like this doesn't mean being confrontational or aggressive. It means calmly but firmly communicating your limits and following through on them. If Maya had said after the second or third time, I value punctuality and I won't wait more than 15 minutes, and then actually left when Chris was late again, she would have shown him that she means what she says. That's how standards are set, not by talking about them, but by living them. The tricky part is that many people, especially in the early stages of dating, are afraid to enforce their standards because they fear losing the other person. But here's the irony. Failing to uphold your standards guarantees that you'll lose something far more valuable, your self-respect. And once you lose that, the relationship stops being about mutual love or respect. It becomes about how much you're willing to shrink yourself to keep the other person around. Passing these pop quizzes. in relationships is really about choosing long-term respect over short-term comfort. It's about recognizing that when someone pushes your boundaries, they're not just testing your patience, they're testing your identity. Are you someone who stands firm on what you believe you deserve? Or are you someone who bends to keep others happy? The answer to that question will determine not just the health of the relationship, but how you feel about yourself every single day you're in it. Ultimately, every time you respond to these tests with clarity and self-respect, you reinforce your worth in their eyes, and more importantly, in your own. You send a clear, unshakable message. My standards are not negotiable, and my value is not up for debate. And once you make that known, the people who truly respect and care for you will rise to meet those standards, while the ones who don't will simply fall away. Either way, you win. When someone says they're confused about their feelings for you, it's tempting to take that at face value. You might think they're wrestling with deep emotions, unsure of what they truly want, or torn between their heart and their mind. But most of the time, that so-called confusion is not an emotional struggle. It's a strategy. It's a mask for convenience. Because here's the truth. People generally know what they want, especially when it comes to relationships. If they can commit to their work schedule, remember the football game on Sunday, plan vacations with friends, and stick to hobbies they enjoy, they're fully capable of making decisions about you. The confusion line isn't about not knowing. It's about not wanting to give up what they're getting from you while avoiding the commitment that comes with giving you clarity. It's a way to keep you in emotional limbo. By playing the confusion card, they create just enough uncertainty to stop you from leaving, but not enough certainty for you to feel secure. This middle ground benefits them greatly. They get the attention, the emotional support, maybe even the physical closeness, without having to step up fully. And because you care about them, you might become overly patient, thinking they just need more time to figure things out. In reality, the more time you give them, the more they enjoy the perks of being with you without having to fully be with you. Think about how powerful that position is. They hold all the cards. They're free to enjoy your company, lean on you for comfort, and know you're emotionally invested, all while keeping an escape hatch open. If they wake up tomorrow and decide to walk away, they can use the confusion excuse as a shield. I told you I wasn't sure becomes their way of dodging responsibility. And because you accepted that narrative for so long, you can end up feeling like you're the one who misread the situation. Here's an example that makes this painfully clear. Let's say there's a woman named Alina who meets a man named Daniel. From the start, things feel exciting. Late night talks, inside jokes, and long weekends together. But a few months in, Alina starts to wonder where things are going. She wants a committed relationship, but Daniel keeps saying things like, I really like you, but I'm just confused about where I'm at right now, or I'm still figuring myself out. Alina, believing Daniel's feelings are genuine but tangled, decides to be patient. She keeps giving him her time and affection, thinking eventually he'll gain clarity. Meanwhile, Daniel continues enjoying everything about their connection. She cooks for him, listens to his problems, spends time with him when he's bored, and gives him emotional warmth. But here's the kicker. Daniel isn't confused at all. He knows he's not ready to commit to her, but he also doesn't want to lose the benefits she brings to his life. By staying confused, he keeps her close without having to step up. Months later, Alina realizes nothing has changed. Every time she brings it up, Daniel gives the same answer. I just need more time. The truth finally hits her. He never needed more time. He needed her to stay available while he enjoyed the comfort she provided. And because she allowed the confusion narrative to continue, she unintentionally taught him that he could get everything from her without giving her the clarity she deserved. This is why confusion is so dangerous in relationships. It's not indecision, it's indecision weaponized. It's a way of keeping you on standby while the other person enjoys all the good parts of having you in their life without making the sacrifices or commitments real relationships require. The way to handle this is to understand that someone who genuinely wants you will make it known. They won't risk losing you by dragging their feet or hiding behind uncertainty. If they say they're confused, you have to see it for what it often is, a stall tactic. The smartest move you can make is to set a clear boundary. I understand you're figuring things out, but I'm looking for something committed. If you're not ready for that, I can't keep investing in this. That's not an ultimatum. That's self-respect. By doing this, you take yourself out of their holding pattern. You force them to either step up or step aside. And the beauty of that is, no matter what they choose, you win. Because you're no longer stuck waiting for someone to make a decision they already made in their heart. The confusion mask slips when you stop playing along. That's when you see whether they were truly lost or just conveniently keeping you exactly where they wanted you. Silence can be one of the most powerful tools in human interaction, and in relationships, it's often used with intention. When someone suddenly goes quiet after an argument, disagreement, or even a meaningful conversation, it's easy to assume they're processing their thoughts or just cooling off. But in many cases, that silence isn't about reflection at all. It's about control. It's a calculated move to see how long it will take before you break the tension and reach out first. This is what's often called the silence test. It's less about the actual issue you discuss and more about the power dynamic between you. The silence test works because it taps into a very human discomfort most people hate: unresolved tension. When communication stops abruptly, the uncertainty gnaws at you. Questions start racing through your mind. Did I say too much? Are they really that upset? Should I just call to clear the air? The longer the silence stretches, the stronger that urge to fix it becomes. And if you're someone who values harmony or fears losing the relationship, you're even more likely to break first. That's exactly what the other person wants to see. They're testing whether you'll hold your position or abandon it in exchange for restoring connection. The silence becomes a kind of bait, not because they need space, but because they want to see how far you'll go to make the situation right. Again, even if you weren't wrong in the first place. The silence test isn't always loud in its intentions, but its implications are huge. If you break every time, you're teaching the other person that this tactic works. It becomes a lever they can pull whenever they want to shift the balance of power in their favor. They know they can shut down, withdraw, and wait you out, and eventually you'll come running. Over time, this pattern erodes your boundaries. You start apologizing just to end the discomfort, even when you've done nothing wrong. You start giving in just to avoid the quiet treatment. And slowly, without even noticing, you're giving away your ability to stand firm. Let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine a woman named Tanya who's dating a man named Luke. One evening, they get into a disagreement about something small, maybe plans for the weekend. Tanya expresses her view calmly, but Luke doesn't like being challenged. Instead of responding or discussing it, he simply goes silent. Hours pass without a message, then a full day. Tanya feels uneasy. She replays the conversation in her head, wondering if she came across too harsh. By the second day, she can't take the quiet anymore. She sends him a long text apologizing, softening her original point, and suggesting they move past it. Luke replies quickly this time, acting as if nothing happened. On the surface, the silence is over. But underneath, Luke has just learned something important. Tanya can't stand prolonged quiet. All he has to do to avoid accountability or to get her to back down is to stop communicating until she reaches out. He didn't have to compromise, explain himself, or acknowledge her point. The silence did the work for him. Now imagine if Tanya had handled it differently. After the argument, she notices Luke's silence but chooses not to break it. She occupies her time, focuses on her own activities, and resists the urge to reach out. After a couple of days, Luke realizes she isn't going to make the first move. He's faced with a choice: either stay silent and risk losing her attention altogether, or break the silence himself. In this version, the power dynamic shifts. The silence test fails because Tanya didn't take the bait. Holding your ground during a silence test doesn't mean being cold or manipulative in return. It means respecting yourself enough to let the other person take responsibility for their own communication. If they want to talk, they'll talk. If they don't, then their silence speaks volumes about the relationship's health. You're not obligated to fill every gap in conversation, especially when that gap is being used to manipulate you. The lesson here is simple, but challenging silence can only control you if you fear it. The moment you stop fearing it, the person using it as a test loses their leverage. That's when you gain something far more valuable than a quick resolution. You gain your self-respect, your boundaries, and the power to decide who you give your energy to. When you can look at a silence test and think, take all the time you want, I'm not chasing. You've already passed it. Feelings can be powerful, intoxicating, and persuasive. They can make you overlook red flags, excuse bad behavior, and compromise on things you once swore you'd never tolerate. That's why feelings alone are not enough to sustain a healthy relationship. They need the framework of boundaries. Boundaries are the invisible lines that protect your dignity, your time, and your emotional health. They are the rules you set for yourself about what is acceptable and what is not, no matter how much you care for someone. Without them, love quickly turns into self-betrayal because you start giving pieces of yourself away in the name of keeping someone else happy. The tricky thing about boundaries is that they often get tested most when you have the strongest feelings. When you really like or love someone, the temptation to make exceptions is high. You might say to yourself, just this once, or they didn't mean it, or it's not worth making a big deal about. But every time you step over your own line, you send a subtle but clear message, both to yourself and to them, that your boundaries are flexible. And once someone believes your boundaries can be bent, they will push them again. The real purpose of boundaries isn't to punish the other person, it's to protect you from losing yourself in the relationship. It's about ensuring that no matter what happens, you remain in alignment with your own values. Love without boundaries is like a house without a foundation. It might look fine for a while, but eventually it collapses under pressure because it has nothing solid to stand on. Here's an example that shows how this plays out in real life. Imagine a woman named Elena who starts dating a man named Ryan. From the start, Elena makes it clear that she values honesty and communication. She even says, if there's ever a problem or you need space, I just want you to be upfront about it. Ryan agrees. But a few months in, Elena notices something. Whenever Ryan is stressed, he disappears for a few days without explanation. The first time it happens, she worries, but when he finally reaches out, she's just relieved to hear from him and doesn't address it. The second time, she tells herself, he's going through a lot. I don't want to add pressure. The third time, it really hurts her, but she still swallows her feelings to avoid conflict. What Elena doesn't realize is that she's betraying herself each time she stays silent. Her feelings for Ryan are making her ignore the very standard she set at the start: open communication. And by allowing this pattern to continue, she's showing Ryan that disappearing without explanation is acceptable. It's not that Ryan necessarily wants to hurt her, but human nature often takes the path of least resistance. If there are no consequences for crossing a line, the line stops existing. Now imagine if Elena held to her boundary after the first incident. She could have said, I understand you need space sometimes, but disappearing without telling me is not something I'm okay with. If it happens again, I won't be able to continue seeing you. And here's the most important part. If it happened again, she would have followed through. That's how boundaries speak louder than feelings. By acting in alignment with her standards, she's not just making a statement to Ryan, she's reinforcing to herself that her needs matter, and she won't betray them for anyone, no matter how strong her emotions are. This doesn't mean boundaries are easy to maintain. In fact, they often require you to do the hardest thing: walk away from someone you care about because they can't or won't meet your non-negotiables. But the alternative, staying and erasing your own limits, costs far more in the long run. You might keep the person for a while, but you'll lose your peace, your self-worth, and your ability to trust yourself. The people who truly value you will not be scared away by your boundaries. They will see them as a sign that you know your worth, and those who are only interested in you on their terms will walk away, which is actually a gift, because it saves you from investing in someone who doesn't have the capacity or willingness to respect you. At the end of the day, Feelings can make you want to hold on, but boundaries are what make sure you're holding on to something healthy. They are the guardrails that keep love from turning into self-sacrifice. And when you stick to them, you send a powerful message. I can care deeply for you, but I will not stop caring for myself in the process. That's when love becomes sustainable, because it's rooted in respect, not desperation. From the very first interaction you have with someone, whether in romance, friendship, or business, you're teaching them how to treat you. Every time you respond to their words or actions, you're sending a signal about what you will accept and what you won't. The first lesson you give them often becomes the foundation for the entire relationship. That's why the early moments matter so much. They set the tone. If the first time someone crosses a line you address it firmly and respectfully, they learn that your boundaries are real and non-negotiable. But if you let it slide, make excuses for them, or pretend it didn't bother you, they learn the opposite, that you can be tested, bent, or even walked over without consequence. People might not consciously think, oh, I can take advantage of this person, but human behavior naturally pushes limits. We all test the waters, even unintentionally, to see how much space we're allowed to take up in someone's life. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just curiosity or habit, but the reaction we get shapes how we continue. If there's no pushback, no clear line, it becomes easy to keep repeating the same behavior, or even to go further. This is why standing firm the first time matters so much. It prevents patterns from forming that you'll later have to work twice as hard to undo. Think of it like training a muscle. If you start off with bad form, you'll have to break old habits before you can build strength properly. In relationships, if you start off by letting someone disrespect your time, your space, or your emotions, you'll have to work much harder to teach them how to value those things later. And the truth is, some people won't even bother to adjust because they've already learned they can get away with more elsewhere. So why change here? Here's a clear example. Imagine a woman named Priya who starts dating a man named Adam. On their second date, Adam shows up 30 minutes late without sending a message to let her know. When he arrives, he laughs it off and says, "You know how bad traffic gets?" Even though Priya knows he could have texted. Inside, she feels annoyed, but she doesn't want to ruin the evening. She smiles, says, "It's fine," and they carry on. Fast forward a few weeks, Adam is late again, this time by almost an hour. Again, there's no heads up. Priya waits at the restaurant, telling herself, he's worth it, he's just busy. By this point, Adam has learned something. She will wait for him no matter how long he takes, and there's no real consequence for keeping her waiting. Now lateness becomes a pattern, not because Adam is inherently inconsiderate, but because Priya taught him unintentionally that her time isn't a firm boundary. Now, imagine if Priya had handled the first incident differently. When Adam arrived 30 minutes late without a call, she could have said, "I understand traffic happens, but it's important to me that someone lets me know if they'll be late. If it happens again, I'd prefer to reschedule." This is calm, clear, and sets a standard. If Adam respects her, he'll make the effort to communicate next time. If he doesn't, she'll know early on that he's not someone who values her time, and she can decide whether to continue. The point is, people pay attention to the lessons you teach them in the beginning. Those first moments where you choose between staying silent or speaking up are not just isolated events. They're the blueprint for how the rest of the relationship will unfold. And it's far easier to set the tone from day one than it is to backtrack after months or years of tolerating behavior you never wanted. This doesn't mean you have to be harsh or confrontational. It's about communicating your boundaries early and following through on them. Respectfully standing your ground tells people, I respect myself, and if you want to be part of my life, you will too. And when you do that, you naturally attract the kind of people who appreciate and honor those standards, while those who don't will fade away, which is exactly what you want. The truth is, you can't control how someone chooses to act, but you can control what you allow. Every yes you give to bad behavior is a silent permission slip to keep doing it. Every no you give to disrespect is a reminder that you value yourself too much to settle for less. And once people see that you mean it, they'll either rise to meet your standard or remove themselves from your life. Either outcome is a win for you because you've stayed true to yourself. When a man is genuinely sure about you, there's no need for games, no silent treatment to see how you'll react, no calculated withdrawal of affection to measure your patience. Certainty in relationships doesn't require experiments. It requires clarity in action. When someone knows your value and wants you in their life, their focus isn't on pushing your buttons, it's on building trust, connection, and a future with you. They don't waste time to figure out what they can get away with because they're too busy making sure you feel secure in their presence. The very act of testing someone reveals something important: indecision. If he's running little trials to see if you'll put up with inconsistency, disrespect, or emotional distance, it means he hasn't fully chosen you. It means he's still evaluating, still deciding, still keeping the door cracked open for other possibilities. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If he hasn't chosen you in his mind, you are living in a position where your place in his life is conditional. That's dangerous because it means the relationship is never on solid ground. Someone who's sure about you won't want to risk losing you by playing with your emotions. They won't intentionally create situations that could drive you away just to see if you'll stay. Their priority will be to make you feel wanted, valued, and respected because they understand that security builds intimacy while uncertainty erodes it. Love that's confident doesn't need to prove anything. It simply shows up every day in actions, consistency, and honesty. Here's a short example that illustrates the difference. Let's say there are two men, Alex and Ben, both dating women they're interested in. Alex likes Jenna, but he's not completely sure if she's the one. He starts playing little games, waiting hours to reply to her messages just to see if she'll double text, casually mentioning other women to see if she gets jealous, or pulling back affection to test if she'll chase him. Jenna notices the changes but convinces herself that maybe Alex is just figuring himself out. What she doesn't realize is that Alex is using these tests to measure her tolerance level. He wants to know if she'll accept less effort, because if she does, it gives him permission to keep her as an option instead of making her a priority. On the other hand, Ben meets Claire and knows almost immediately that he wants her in his life. There's no testing period, no mixed signals, no unnecessary games. He texts her when he says he will, he keeps his promises, and he treats her with respect regardless of how she reacts to anything. His energy isn't spent measuring her loyalty through stress or doubt. It's spent investing in the relationship and making sure she feels secure. Claire never has to question where she stands with Ben because his actions are consistent with his words. The difference between Alex and Ben is certainty. Ben has chosen Claire and behaves accordingly. Alex is still deciding, so he runs experiments to gather data, not realizing that these tests often damage the very connection he's evaluating. If you're on the receiving end of these tests, it's crucial to understand what they mean. They're not harmless quirks. They're signals that the person in front of you is still deciding about you. And while it's their right to decide, it's also your right to decide whether you want to stick around for that process. Being tested puts you in a passive role, waiting for them to make up their mind. But you don't have to wait. You can make your own choice first. Choosing yourself doesn't always mean walking away immediately. It can mean setting clear boundaries, refusing to engage in mind games, and making it clear that you value straightforwardness over manipulation. If someone is truly serious about you, they'll recognize that and step up. If they're not, they'll either keep testing until you fail on their terms or drift away entirely. And in that case, you've saved yourself from investing in someone who was never fully committed to begin with. In the end, certainty is one of the clearest signs of genuine love. When someone knows your value, they don't gamble with it. They protect it. They honor it. And they make it obvious through consistent effort. If you ever feel like you're constantly being evaluated instead of embraced, don't wait for them to decide if you're enough. Decide if they're enough for you. The right person won't make you audition for a role you've already earned. So, hear me when I say this: stop making excuses for behavior that's telling you the truth. If he's acting distant, inconsistent, unclear, that's not confusion. That's a test. And the real question isn't whether he'll pass your tests. The real question is, will you pass this? You pass it by knowing who you are, by refusing to settle, by demanding the kind of love you deserve, not the kind of love you have to beg for. Because here's the thing, when you know your worth, you don't fear losing someone who's unsure about you. You fear losing yourself in the process of keeping them. And if you remember nothing else from today, remember this: you are the prize. And the prize doesn't chase, doesn't beg, and doesn't audition for a role it didn't apply for. The prize sets the standard and watches who can meet it.